China is facing an unprecedented wave of civil unrest and protests as its economy falters and public anger mounts against the authoritarian policies of the Chinese Communist Party. Multiple crises are converging to create a perfect storm that threatens to topple the CCP's tight grip on power. This video will provide an in-depth examination of the various factors contributing to instability in China and analyze whether the CCP can contain the turmoil. Mortgage boycott spread across China. In July, homeowners across China began organizing mortgage boycotts to protest stalled construction on pre-sold housing projects. This movement quickly spread to over 300 projects in over 100 cities, representing over $100 billion of debt held by China's state banks. The roots of this crisis date back to the 1990s, when Chinese real estate developers began taking full payment for housing projects before breaking ground on construction. This allowed developers to use the down payments to acquire more land and take on increasing levels of leverage. The business model was essentially an unsustainable Ponzi scheme reliant on ever-increasing real estate prices. The mortgage boycotts were triggered when Evergrande, China's second-largest property developer, defaulted on its debts in 2021. Other heavily indebted developers soon followed suit, unable to make payments or complete projects. Homebuyers who had already made down payments refused to make mortgage payments on unfinished homes, demanding action from developers and banks. CCP is extremely concerned by the growing scale of the mortgage boycott movement. Real estate and related industries account for 30% of China's GDP. A collapse in the property sector would have severe ramifications for China's economy and financial system. Banks hold trillions in shaky developer loans and are already limiting withdrawals in some areas. Perhaps even more worrying for the CCP is the political nature of the protest. The movement is well organized online and increasingly bold in directly challenging the government's handling of the crisis. Participants have resisted CCP pressure and censorship attempts. The CCP views the protests as an illegal political rebellion rather than merely financial grievances. With billions in mortgage payments at stake, the movement has the potential to undermine two pillars of CCP power: the banking system and social stability. The CCP is attempting to quietly suppress the unrest, but a heavy-handed crackdown risks further inflaming protester anger. For now, the mortgage boycotts continue to grow as delayed projects pile up across China. Bank runs spread following fraudulent investment schemes. While the mortgage protests target China's big state banks, smaller regional banks are also facing liquidity crises due to interbank lending schemes gone awry. Over 4,000 small and medium banks operate in China, serving rural areas and small businesses. In Henan Province, customers of several regional banks discovered in April that they could not withdraw deposits from their accounts. It soon emerged that the banks were involved in fraudulent investment products that offered interest rates far higher than normal savings accounts. An estimated $6 billion of customer funds were secretly transferred into these products without consent. When panicking depositors rushed to pull out their money, they found the banks had insufficient cash reserves after years of mismanagement. Protests erupted in cities across Henan, with crowds demanding government action to return their lost savings. Some depositors even threatened violence and suicide in increasingly desperate acts. CCP responded by suppressing news of the protest and mobilizing large police forces. In one incident in July, hundreds of depositors faced off against over 1,000 armed police officers sent to quell demonstrations. But the bank runs continue to spread. Many regional banks across China are over-leveraged and potentially concealing bad debts. Customers are losing trust in the entire banking system. With rural citizens representing over 40% of China's population, instability poses a severe political threat to the CCP. Furthermore, the CCP must now consider this risk of contagion. Could panicked depositors trigger disruptive bank runs at bigger institutions if the regional banking crisis worsens? For now, the CCP is focused on quietly containing the smaller bank collapses through bailouts and deposit insurance funds. However, the underlying structural problems remain unresolved. lockdowns reimposed to contain COVID outbreaks, just as economic challenges pile up and social unrest brews. China is once again battling COVID-19 outbreaks across the country. New variants are proving immune to China's domestically produced vaccines. Daily case totals reached all-time highs in November 2022, exceeding April peaks during Shanghai's brutal two-month lockdown. The CCP remains committed to its unrealistic zero-COVID policy and is imposing snap lockdowns, quarantines, mass testing, and other restrictions in cities across China. Over 200 million Chinese citizens currently face some form of lockdown as the virus spreads. Quarantines and travel limits are disrupting daily life, damaging productivity, and stifling consumer demand. Lockdowns have sparked civil unrest in areas like Xinjiang and Guangzhou, with citizens taking to the streets to protest harsh restrictions, even clashing violently with police forces enforcing quarantines. The economic impact of renewed lockdowns and curtailed discretionary spending will be severe, especially heading into the crucial winter shopping season. The International Monetary Fund predicts China's GDP growth of just 3.2% in 2022, far below government targets. Beijing's unbending commitment to zero COVID puts the CCP in a no-win situation. Easing restrictions risks ceding control of the pandemic and revealing the zero COVID policy as a failure. But continued lockdowns will prolong economic damage and public resentment. With no exit plan in sight, China's re-entry into closed-loop quarantines represents another powerful wave crashing against the CCP's foundations of control. And the threat of new variants re-emerging makes it impossible to predict when or if the CCP's COVID restrictions can truly end. Rapid decline in population. Looming on the horizon is a demographic time bomb that threatens to devastate China's economy over the coming decades. The CCP's imposition of a harsh one-child policy from 1980 to 2015 has left China with a rapidly aging population and shrinking workforce. China's birth rate has plummeted to a 60-year low. Deaths began exceeding births for the first time in 2021. United Nations projections show China's population could decline by 50% by 2100. The working-age population is projected to plunge 35% by 2035. Already, labor shortages are emerging across China. These statistics represent a seismic generational shift. China's seniors over age 65 currently make up 13% of the population. By 2035, seniors will comprise 25% of China's dwindling populace. Experts worry this imminent old age tsunami will overwhelm pension and healthcare systems. Meanwhile, housing demand is collapsing as urbanization slows dramatically. Within a decade, deaths are expected to outnumber births in Chinese cities by 2 to 1. Hundreds of thousands of vacant apartments already litter urban landscapes as fertility rates drop. Add in the gender imbalance of 30 million more men than women, and China faces an explosive mixture of demographic headwinds. The CCP's social engineering attempts like raising the retirement age, restricting divorces, and limiting abortions have failed to reverse the coming demographic disaster. In the face of this population cliff, the CCP will struggle to maintain economic growth and provide for aging citizens who expect a comfortable retirement after decades of toil. Widespread elder poverty and neglect could inspire resentment and rebellion against CCP rule. Global ramifications. The rest of the world has a tremendous stake in the outcome of China's mounting internal crises. As the second-largest economy globally, instability in China would inflict immense damage on international markets and commercial activity. Multinational companies face huge risks to their China operations. Trade flows would freeze as factories shut and consumers retreat. Commodity prices could crater, devastating commodity-dependent emerging economies. Trillions in bad debts impairing Western financial institutions would trigger renewed banking scandals. With China comprising over 17% of worldwide GDP, global growth would evaporate if Chinese growth turns negative. Recessions and currency crises would proliferate worldwide. Dependent developing nations may react with resentment and even violence as the tide of Chinese investment dollars recedes. Geopolitical realignments would also occur as the CCP turns inward while attempting to contain domestic disorder. From the South China Sea to Taiwan to India's contested border, Chinese military adventures would be sidelined. U.S. alliances could solidify in the Asia-Pacific region. On the hopeful side, the democratic West would gain immense strategic advantage over a preoccupied and weakened China. Economically, companies and supply chains could reduce overdependence on China's volatile market. Democratic values and human rights might advance globally without the CCP's obstructionism. But in the chaotic short run, the world must brace for impact. The spillover effects of a Chinese collapse would test diplomatic capabilities and economic resilience across the far reaches of planet Earth. An inward-looking, unstable China could unleash unpredictable dangers, and the CCP will remain a nuclear-armed wildcard. China is falling, with cracks multiplying across almost every pillar propping up CCP control. Many China experts see heightened potential for national chaos. A destructive spiral could occur if bank runs, COVID lockdowns, unemployment, and demographic decline fuel each other's fires. Consumer confidence and social stability could collapse. So what would widespread civil disorder and open rebellion against the CCP look like, and how might the CCP respond? The combination of insolvent developers, dying banks, unpaid mortgages, and ghost city apartments could bring China's property sector to its knees. Real estate accounts for 25–30% of China's GDP. A comprehensive collapse would vaporize wealth and tank the economy. Unemployment could rapidly climb past 10 or even 20%. White-collar professionals would join blue-collar factory workers in breadlines and soup kitchens. With COVID still circulating and healthcare costs soaring, public health could deteriorate in a humanitarian disaster. Facing deprivation and hunger, the Chinese people may no longer fear CCP repression. Widespread protests and riots could materialize as faith in government promises evaporates. Armed insurrection or inter-province warfare, led by rogue generals, cannot be ruled out if conditions spin out of control. How might the CCP react to such doomsday scenarios? Based on Beijing's brutal crackdowns on past unrest, the CCP would almost certainly deploy widespread military and police violence against its own citizens. Martial law and Tiananmen Square-style massacres are possible, perhaps even likely. The CCP has demonstrated a willingness to kill thousands to retain its stranglehold on power. But China's populace is now far larger, more educated, and more difficult to control in the internet age. Slaughtering protesters could backfire and increase rebellion against a depraved regime. Would the military remain unified amid such barbarity? Defection of generals or rank-and-file soldiers may occur. Whatever the outcome of such nightmarish scenarios, the human toll would be horrific. Millions of lives hang in the balance as the CCP pursues disastrous policies and sows the seeds of its own downfall. The entire global economy would crater in the resulting chaos. CCP Strategies for Self-Preservation. As dissent and economic turmoil threaten to overwhelm China, the CCP, under Xi Jinping, may resort to ever more desperate and extreme measures to maintain its stranglehold on power. Based on Beijing's escalating authoritarian shift, the following repression tactics appear likely. 1. Increased censorship and information control. The CCP will ratchet up propaganda efforts and block foreign media. All unfavorable news and economic data will be suppressed. Chinese citizens will be cut off from the truth as the CCP silences critics and shapes a false narrative. 2. Elevated surveillance and police monitoring. Cutting-edge technology like facial recognition cameras, smartphone monitoring, and big data will enable unprecedented governmental invasion of privacy and restrictions on free speech. Law enforcement will crack down ruthlessly on dissidents. 3. Renewed nationalism and anti-Western rhetoric. The CCP may provoke international conflicts and stir up nationalist sentiments to distract China's discontented masses. Territorial saber-rattling regarding Taiwan offers an appealing strategy. 4. Expanded labor camps and political reeducation. U.S. under Mao Zedong, the CCP may attempt mass imprisonment of dissidents in modernized gulags. Communist indoctrination will aim to brainwash criticisms and promote government worship. 5. Increased social credit restrictions. China's Orwellian social credit scoring system will tighten the economic vice on regime critics. Mass blacklisting from loans, schools, transportation, and other necessities may ensue. 6. Eliminating term limits 4C rule. The CCP will continue removing constitutional restrictions on Xi Jinping serving indefinitely as China's authoritarian ruler. Consolidating power under a personalistic dictator offers a perceived survival advantage. Unfortunately, these tactics have worked for the CCP in the past. Enhanced 21st century technological tools may enable unprecedented thought control and police power over China's population. The CCP has also steadily increased military spending and weapons development in anticipation of domestic unrest. But most experts agree heightened repression is an unsustainable strategy. Eliminating economic prosperity and hope for the future only feeds the flames of resentment against the CCP's lies and failures. At some point, daily indignities suffered by China's citizenry could outweigh residual fear of government retaliation. Then mass defiance may truly flare out of the CCP's control.